Today's episode is focused squarely on the world of photography, specifically the often underestimated yet incredibly crucial model release clause that's woven into your photography agreement that you have with your clients. And guess what? We're not stopping there. We are exploring the twists and turns that come with model releases. Ever had clients raise an eyebrow over a certain clause? I've got you covered. Curious about who should be adding their John Hancock to that model release? Think here both parents in a family photo shoot, or should you only have one sign? We are unraveling that mystery. And what happens when someone who didn't sign the release pops up in the photos and isn't happy about it when you share it online? Hold tight, because that's on the menu too. In this episode, I'm going to break it all down for you. So let's do this.
You're listening to the Legal Paige podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. As a reminder, before we get into this episode, I am legally obligated to give my disclaimer. I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. All legal information I talk about in this episode is intended for the masses and a large variety of different businesses. Please seek out another attorney in your city and home state if you need specific legal advice related to your unique business. Okay, let's get back to it. As I explained in the intro, I'm going to be sharing today what exactly you need to know about model releases, who should sign, and privacy concerns that can pop up when you have a model release clause in your photography agreement. Let's just go over generals here, what to know about model releases. So a model release is a type of contract between a photographer and the individual or individuals that is or are the subject of a photograph. So the contract is usually signed by these parties, and it gives the photographer permission to publish and use the photographs commercially as defined by the terms of the model release contract. Now, I said contract here because a model release can be just that. It can be a 4-corner page document that all parties sign, but model releases can also be singular clauses within a whole photography agreement. They give the same legal soundness, whether they're in contract form or clause form. And here I want to talk about mainly clauses because that is usually the way that they are conveyed to your clients. So a model release clause in a photography contract, it's just a singular legal provision. It outlines the rights and permissions related to the use of a person's likeness in the photographs taken by you as the photographer. So when anyone appears in your photos, they have certain rights to control how their likeness is used within those images, especially when you have decided that those photographs are going to be used for commercial purposes or marketing or public display. A model release clause typically specifies that a person who's being photographed, the model or the subject or subjects in the photos, the model release would say it grants the photographer the right to use their likeness in various ways. Usually it's, yes, we're okay with you publishing these photographs for marketing materials on social media, websites, print publications, and other promotional activities you may do. And by including a model release clause in your contract, you as a photographer are ensuring that you have the legal right to use these images without any future legal challenges from the subjects. Usually it's an all-encompassing model release that says kind of in perpetuity you could use this. It's not like for a certain period of time, 3 months or something like that. Usually it's forever, so long as your business is in effect. And the clause itself provides that clear record, evidence, proof, etc., of the subjects' right, apostrophe at the end, consent to be photographed and have their likeness used for these purposes. The two most important things, though, to consider when deciding whether or not to have a model release is, one, if the subject
of the photo, that individual is identifiable in the photograph. And 2, if the image is being used commercially, that like publicly viewed forum to market or advertise your business. So you're probably sitting there thinking, great, Paige, but on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, my website, do I really need a model release to share on those platforms? Yes, you do. If you're sharing photographs for any commercial reasons, that's promoting your business, products, and/or services, you have to have a model release. And this is especially important when the photographs prominently feature a recognizable individual, like their faces are smack dab on the middle of your social media feed or on your website. Like people would immediately know who that human is. So commercial use involves using the images to generate revenue or promote a product or service. If you are trying to do that with the images in any way, shape, or form, you need a model release. Essentially, using the photo for advertising puts you at risk of being sued under privacy laws. That is the legal consideration here. If you didn't have the subject sign a model release clause with you within your photography agreement, you are subject to some privacy laws within your state and federally within the nation that you need to be aware of. As always, it's just better to be safe than sorry. I want you to get a model release from every single client you shoot because it's easy and it's a way to protect yourself in the future. So who should sign your contract? That includes your model release clause. I've broken down exactly what a model release is, why you need it, when you might need one, as well as, how to acquire getting that from every single client. You're going to have this clause in your actual contract. It literally says model release and it's underlined in bold. Who though? Who should sign these contracts? And this is the biggie that I was like, I have to talk about this in an episode because family photography and people in photographs at weddings that aren't the clients who are signing, like these are all questions that come up a lot here in the TLP community. So let's talk about the wedding type of situation first, where there are multiple people outside of your clients, so third parties in almost every photo, right, at a wedding. But who should sign the model release in this situation? Because usually it's just your clients, right? The couple is the main focus of the wedding and the clients are the ones who hired you. So they should definitely sign the contract that includes the model release clause because it gives you permission to use all of those wedding images featuring them for promotional purposes. But what about immediate family members that are probably going to be in photos and you're probably either going to share on a blog or you're going to share in like a carousel format on social media? So typically, immediate family members here, right? Parents, siblings, grandparents, they're expected to be present in wedding photos. It's a good idea then to include kind of language in your contract specifying that, these people who are expected to be present, immediate family members, kind of automatically grant permission to their likeness being used in your portfolio and marketing materials. So something like client and their agents, guests, and family members agree to yada, yada, yada. That's like what you would put in your model release clause. But what about extended family and friends? As I've had this pop up before. So if people, I don't know, if you're having like government officials come to the wedding or there's like someone that really the clients know in particular that they are going to invite that cannot be in photographs. I mean, that's something you can discuss separately with your clients and you can make sure that you're not using those photos for any type of social media or like website promotional purposes. You would not use any on the dance floor or at the reception of the event, just in case somebody like that was in the photos, just only the photos of the clients. It's still like a really, really good marketing opportunity. But for all intents and purposes, extended family members, friends who might be captured in photos, it's kind of a bit more nuanced here. It's like you can't obtain a model release from every single person. It's like logistically challenging and kind of impossible. But you could include within the model release clause in your contract something that states that the couple confirms they've obtained necessary permissions from their guests for their likeness to be used or that it's upon the couple to do this. So it kind of provides some legal protection from you. And then it's up to them whether they're going to like post something or, tell their guests something or just put it on the clients as much as you can. Okay, now let's talk about family photos, especially family photos with two parents in them and minors. So always, 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 always have a parent or legal guardian sign on behalf of minors if you intend to use those photos for commercial purposes whatsoever. For minors, you need the consent legally of their parent or guardian, legal guardian, to use their images. This is especially true when you are publicly displaying images of young children. So you have to get the model release. It needs to be within the contract, and the model release itself should include things about the children who will be present. Usually that's kind of like up in the who will be present section, like at the top of your contract or the invoice portion of your contract. And then the model release clause would relate to that. So a legal parent or guardian is signing on behalf of all of the people that are listed to be present in the photographs. And that is all agreed to when they sign the bottom of the document. Just again, when working with minors in any way, always, always, always prioritize their privacy and safety. So even if you have permission to use the images, always avoid using any types of full names or names at all if possible. Just call them, the blank family, whatever their last name is, or any other identifying information without explicit consent from the parents or legal guardians. And be sensitive to situations where there might be custody disputes later down the road. Like you just never know also. Or situations where one parent has legal rights to make decisions about the child's image and the other doesn't, right? So full custody versus no custody. Always ensure that the person signing the model release has the legal authority to do so. I'm going to get further into implied consent here in a second. So like if one parent signs a family photography agreement on behalf of all the kids, but the other parent is like still in the photos, but they didn't sign the contract, like what do you do? Just hold on. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I also wanted to talk about like a big family shoot. Okay, so you have like 20 family members present. There's a lot of different people in these photos, but who should sign? Usually you're only going to have one person booking with you, right? Whomever is kind of in control of the execution of this, who's contacting you for services. Maybe it's like a past client. Now they want a big extended family shoot. Or that's something that you publicize in your own marketing and advertising is you do big family member shoots. And you're always probably just going to have one person that you're like sending the images to. They're in charge of like disseminating it to all of their family members, so on and so forth. The key thing though to remember here is that all persons in the photographs and definitely minors that are present have to have their legal guardian or parent sign the model release in order for you to use those images. You can't just have one person sign, but there's 5 different families involved and they're not the legal guardian or parent of all of the kids. So I always suggest that you inform the person who's booking with you that they can sign the model release on behalf of their family unit, but you will bring a copy of a model release. So it's just like the one-pager document, and you will have all of the families sign that model release. And just to kind of tell them, to make everyone aware that you'll be doing that, before or after. And if you don't get that, then you can't share the photos. And finally, one last thing, I want to talk about styled shoots. Always, always, always for model release purposes, the people in the photos, so if you're hiring models, they need to sign a very non-exclusive, very, very broad model release for you to give photos to multiple businesses and other photographers to use. They're probably going to be in a multitude of businesses' portfolios. So that is really important to get. Do not hire models without getting model releases signed by them for styled shoots. Okay, turning to implied consent. This is like a lot of legal information here, but it is really important to kind of understand what implied consent is, how it's given to you in most family photo shoot situations, and what to do if that implied consent is ever revoked. So implied consent with a model release refers to the idea that under certain circumstances, a person's actions or behavior can be interpreted as granting permission for their likeness to be used in photographs for specific purposes. So implied consent is not explicitly stated in any written agreement like a traditional model release clause, but it's more of an inference, right, from the context in which the images were taken and now how they're being used by you as the photographer, like on social media or your website or yada, yada. What if one parent signs a family photography contract and the other parent doesn't? This happens like 90% of the time, right? We're only sending it to one client. So does this other parent give you implied consent if they then see your photograph being used on your website and they don't say anything? My answer to this is not like a resounding yes, unfortunately. You have to look at your local laws. Laws regarding implied consent really differ from one state, one jurisdiction to another. Some might recognize implied consent more readily, while others may have like stricter requirements for obtaining explicit consent versus, they're not going to uphold implied consent, especially when using images for commercial purposes. Just lots of states don't like it. In the case of minor children, it's generally understood that both parents have equal rights and authority to when it comes to decisions involving their children, including giving consent for their images to be used. So if one parent signed the contract and the other did not, there's probably some legal issues there if the photograph is being used for commercial purposes and one of the parents is unhappy that you did so. What about silence, though, as consent? That's kind of what I'm talking about here. Like silence in action. If they're seeing it, if they're posting it on their own accounts, it's basically interpreted as implied consent. They are aware of the photograph being used on your website or your social media, and they don't raise any objections. Lots and lots of courts will potentially consider that as consenting to its use of how you're using it. Just all around, realistically speaking, I have never, ever, ever encountered this as a photographer, especially as someone who's done 250 plus family sessions. I've never had an issue. One person, usually the mother, just in most, nuclear families, always signs on behalf of the minors. But I usually don't require both parties to sign. I'm not going to have both parents sign. Usually, whomever is the controller or booker of this situation is just the other person's along for the ride, right? They're just going to be told what to wear and show up. And so I don't need them to be any more involved than they already are. And I already have to make sure that they feel comfortable when photographing them. And I'm taking on the burden and risk, just honestly knowing that in the future, a parent could come back and say, please don't share that image of me, or ask the photos to be taken down. And I would happily do so because they didn't sign my contract. I know that I likely have implied consent from them if they don't say anything, but I don't really want to argue that. And of course, if there was some type of divorce legal battle happening or custody dispute, I would 100% respect the need to take down photos and or share with the other parent. I've had that happen before where they do separate and then the one parent is the only person who had access to those images. If the other parent is in the images, then technically speaking, you have the ability to give those images to them as well. Or you can contact their attorneys and kind of sort that out. Can I give these images to this person? They, probably both have legal rights to their children's images being used. And if I'm contacted in any way regarding that as a photographer, I'm out. All photos of them are being taken down. I don't want to be involved. So that's how I'm moving forward. Alas, that is my full summary surrounding implied consent. I want to switch gears a bit. What if you send a photography contract that includes a model release clause, but your clients are private people and they don't want to sign the contract with that type of clause in it? In relation to privacy and model releases for photographs, I want to touch on a law here briefly to get you kind of up to speed on the legalities of this. So the Lanham Act, formerly known as the Trademark Act of 1946. It's a federal law in the U.S. It primarily governs trademark registration, protection, and enforcement, but the Lanham Act also focuses on kind of unfair competition and some commercial usage types of situations. So there are provisions within the Act that relate specifically to privacy and the use of images and photographs. So the Lanham Act might come into play in the following ways, like false endorsement or false advertising. This type of law prohibits false endorsement or false advertising, which technically could occur if someone's likeness is used in a way that implies their endorsement of a product, your photography services, without their permission. They could claim that, okay? Or think about like a commercial misappropriation potential claim that could be made. Obviously, like I said, the Lanham Act addresses trademark issues, but it could also relate to an image being used for commercial purposes without proper authorization. And that would violate the Lanham Act if it kind of creates that false association between the individual and the product or service being advertised. I just wanted to give you like some clear kind of legal implications of doing things against people's privacy. And that's all within the Lanham Act here. So what if your client doesn't want to sign a model release? At the end of the day, you cannot force your client to sign anything that they are uncomfortable with. The client may have many reasons as to why they do not want their photos being publicly posted, and it's your responsibility to respect that as a photographer. For instance, clients who are celebrities, if they're influencers or government officials, they're often very concerned about maintaining their privacy, and they probably are not going to agree to a traditional model release. But the biggest issue we see on the photographer's side is that having the signed model release, it's built into your overall package price, meaning that if you are not able to use those photos, then you're left with fewer photos to use for your own marketing and advertising, and it's kind of a loss to you in some respect. So with that being said, you have a few options here as a photographer and a business owner. One, you can modify your model release clause without a fee. What I'm saying here is you're turning a model release clause into a privacy of photographs clause. The language should say something that you agree to complete confidentiality of the photos with the exception of anything you and the client have agreed to in writing. It gives your clients that peace of mind knowing their photos will remain private, that you won't share with anybody, third parties, vendors, and you won't use the photos for marketing purposes. And this is kind of like easiest way to go about this situation. You're not going to charge them a fee. You're just going to change it to a privacy of photographs clause. Option 2 is you change the model release clause with a fee. This is a way to kind of reimburse your business from the lost advertisement opportunity that would have occurred if you were able to use the client's photos in a public manner. A common example where we see a fee attached to a privacy of photographs clause, and you're likely honestly going to sign probably a massive NDA as well, is working with celebrities. So celebrities pay photographers for complete privacy. I've seen tens of thousands of dollars being paid for these types of events and complete privacy purposes. Also, probably not only is privacy involved, but like a release of copyright or assignment of copyright to them. That's going to be tens of thousands of dollars as well. But here we're just talking about the model release clause turns into a privacy of photographs clause that they're paying for a fee because you can't use those images, especially if it's one that you're like, oh my gosh, this is a venue that I've always wanted to photograph at. And then they're like, please don't post any of these images. I don't want to sign the model release clause. And you're like, I want these clients, but it's now going to cost me. Like I could potentially like not have other clients know that I've shot there before, but you want to be respectful. Like maybe a small fee attached to that is appropriate here. So the fee is kind of to encourage clients into signing a model release, but also to compensate you for the loss of that, non-ability to share. while taking into consideration the total amount of your package. So usually photographers here, you're going to ask me for a number, so I'm just going to give you one. Like around 10%, 20% of the total fee as kind of a restriction on a model release. Don't hold me to that number. I've just heard it before, especially in like different comments and things in the Legal Paige community. And we always keep our finger on tap of what's going on and what other people are saying in other photography groups. So I would say something around there. It's not going to be like 50% of your total package price. That's just kind of a lot and outrageous. All right, option 3 is you could customize the model release to fit your client's requirements and needs. You're always able to kind of make a limited use model release clause with your clients. And this would include very specific guidelines, such as only using photos in your printed portfolio. Okay, so if you go to an in-person event, you could open a beautiful like coffee table album that would include them, but it's yours only, okay? It's not publicly displayed like on social media. Or maybe they say, you're totally fine to use these images. I just don't want our faces to be there. So then you know in advance, I'm going to take a lot of side profile views or a lot of like when they're walking away, so their backs are turned towards you, but you still get like the full landscape outside or the full venue that you want to showcase. There's definite ways that you can customize a model release. You just need to talk to your clients. Like, what are you uncomfortable with? And how can we kind of come to a mutual agreement here that serves both you and me? I have definitely made an option like this available to you because sometimes you don't want a complete outright privacy of photographs clause. So you can input any type of like negotiations into your new privacy of photographs clause, and you can get that in the Legal Paige shop. So we have a singular a la carte privacy of photographs clause that would include this option. And then finally, number 4 is you simply require a model release. I know photographers that'll just be like, I always require a model release. I have the right to implement any policies that I want to, and I'm not going to enter into a photography agreement without a signed model release. It just makes me really uncomfortable. Like, what if I don't remember later on and I accidentally share, or I have, all kinds of people who work underneath me or contractors and so on and so forth. So if it's your policy to have a signed model release in order to shoot and capture the images for these clients, you can regularly implement that policy. Clients should be aware as soon as possible that this is a firm policy held by your company, just so everyone's on the same page. Honestly, TLP's take, when it comes to a model release or comfortability of your client, I always suggest you side with your client. You want to make them feel as comfortable as possible. Making someone uncomfortable by trying to convince them to sign it, it's just kind of a weird situation at the beginning of your client relationship, and their happiness should outweigh the importance of you using photos for, marketing and advertising purposes. Honestly, I'm just like, do a styled shoot or like do something else. But you're always within your right to charge a privacy fee or never shoot without a release if that's how you want to go about business. I like to give all of the options here at the Legal Paige, especially on the podcast for you, so that you are the master of your own business. You get to choose your path forward. And there you have it. We have covered the ins and outs of model releases, everything from who signs them to privacy concerns that can pop up during client conversations. The key takeaway, photographers, it's a must to secure a model release from each client you work with. And this is usually in clause form in your photography contract. When you intend to use any photographs of the people in there, their likeness for commercial use, meaning your marketing and advertising. It's a simple yet powerful way to protect yourself down the road. And remember, it's always better to be safe than sorry. To all vendors, keep that legal foundation strong. It sets you apart. Whether you're behind the camera or providing essential services at an event, contracts are your shield against uncertainty. And for photographers, that solid model release clause within your contract ensures that you've got your client's written consent up front. It's ready to go when it's time to share those images. It's really your safety net in case of unexpected twists or turns or people revoking implied consent or people not wanting their images online anymore. I want to make sure that you know that all TLP full-length photography contracts come with a model release clause, so you don't ever have to purchase one in addition. But if you need a privacy of photographs clause, that's not included. That's an a la carte provision that you can find at thelegalpage.com. And you can add it in when clients ask for more, privacy and they're not comfortable with kind of the open-ended model release template clause that are in our contracts. But wedding photography contracts, family and couples photography contract, a boudoir contract, a senior contract, all of those include model release clauses. Some of them are a bit more nuanced than others, but they are in there, so you don't need to purchase them. And it's a good idea all around to have a really, really well-drafted photography contract. So if you don't have one of our TLP full-length photography contracts, you're going to know, awesome, model release clauses in there, but so are 30 to 40 other clauses that I know I need. And as you continue your business journey, always, my friends, keep learning, stay aware, and keep your legal game strong. Until next time, Legal Pagers.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.